America mourns. Conservative Catholic Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia is remembered. Political battle. The fight over the future of the High Court and critical cases hanging in the balance.
Pope Francis came to Mexico to pray to Our Lady of Guadalupe. We'll bring you that story and all the latest on his historic trip coming up.
And right of election. A woman shares her personal faith journey and how Pope Francis drew her to the church. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for President's Day, Monday, February 15th, 2016. Flags fly at half-staff honoring Justice Antonin Scalia. His sudden death leaves a huge void for conservatives on the Supreme Court. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. Justice Scalia's body has now been flown back to Virginia from Texas. He apparently died in his sleep. He was on a hunting trip, but never woke up on Saturday morning. After consulting with his personal physician and sheriff's investigators, a judge in Texas declared that he died from natural causes. His family decided against an autopsy. Funeral arrangements are still not finalized tonight. A political battle over filling the now vacant position on the High Court formed almost immediately. We get to that in just a moment. First, with more about his legacy as a Catholic and as a conservative, here's Jason Calvi at the U.S. Supreme Court tonight.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office.
The duties of the office.
A President Ronald Reagan appointee.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Law professor turned Justice Antonin Scalia is remembered for his deep intellect and quick wit. He fought for something called originalism.
He really was the front lines on bringing back in the original meaning of the Constitution when you're looking at that. But that actually was a real sea change in the way that judges were looking at law.
So Scalia's important 2008 opinion protected gun rights. He allowed abortion restrictions and criticized Roe v. Wade's legal foundation.
And that was the theory used in Roe versus Wade, and it's a theory that is simply a lie.
His writing was entertaining, like this from 1993, like some ghoul in a late-night horror movie that repeatedly sits up in its grave and shuffles abroad after being repeatedly killed and buried. Scalia began the Supreme Court custom of rapid-fire questions at oral arguments.
A lot of them didn't. I was the first one who started asking a lot of questions.
And he made many laugh inside the court.
Really lost, didn't he? Right.
Scalia sparred with liberal justices, but still considered them friends. He went hunting with Elena Kagan and to the opera with Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
My best buddy on the court is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, has always been.
Yeah, and yet you disagree with her about almost everything, I'm told.
Just about everything.
Justice Scalia also led singing at court Christmas parties.
He would insist on real Christmas songs, not Rudolph and things like that. He was someone who observed his faith and someone who found nourishment and guidance in his faith.
Justice Scalia died in his sleep Saturday at the age of 79.
I sleep very well at night, knowing that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, which is to apply the Constitution.
And Scalia served here at the Supreme Court for about 30 years. He leaves behind his wife, Marie, 9 children, including a priest in the Diocese of Arlington, and 28 grandchildren. Brian?
Jason, didn't you have the privilege of seeing Justice Scalia at Mass?
That's right. I was at Mass close to here one holy day, and I heard a very rich, deep voice singing behind me. And during the sign of peace, I was able to look behind and see who it was, Justice Scalia. He frequently attended the traditional Latin Mass in Virginia, where you'd see him unassumingly sitting in the back row.
Jason Calvi at the U.S. Supreme Court. Thank you, Jason. Judge Scalia's death could have a long-lasting effect on several key issues facing the U.S. Supreme Court. Chief White House correspondent and political director Lauren Ashburn looks at the battle now brewing here in Washington.
Within hours of Justice Scalia's death, Republicans were vowing to block any nominee President Obama brought forward. With 54 seats in the Senate, they will most likely do that. To appoint or not? That's the epic battle brewing in Washington. During Saturday's Republican rumble in South Carolina, candidates agreed on one thing.
It's called delay, delay, delay.
I do not believe the president should appoint someone.
While in California, President Obama made it clear he would put forth a candidate.
I plan to fulfill my constitutional responsibilities to nominate a successor in due time. There will be plenty of time for me to do so and for the Senate to fulfill its responsibility to give that person a fair hearing and a timely vote.
Senator Ted Cruz clerked and argued in front of the Supreme Court. He knows how much the balance of the court matters. Here are some of the cases, the top cases, that could be affected this year. The Texas abortion law calling for closing 30 clinics in Texas, President Obama's immigration orders, and California teachers versus unions. Republican Senator McConnell urged the American people should have a voice in the selection of their next Supreme Court justice. Democratic counterpart Reid argued the Senate has a responsibility to fill vacancies as soon as possible. Democrats will need a handful of Republicans to break ranks, including some facing tough re-election bids this year. Democrats are on the attack.
I think first the American people don't like this obstructionism. When you go right off the bat and say, I don't care who he nominates, I am going to oppose him, that's not going to fly.
It takes just 69 days to confirm, on average, a nominee. This one could take more than 11 months. Brian?
Lauren Ashburn at the White House. John Garvey is president of the Catholic University of America, a Harvard Law grad, former dean of Boston College's law school. You knew Justice Scalia personally, what, for 30 years?
I did, almost 30 years, yes. I first met him when I was teaching at the University of Kentucky.
Amazing. And so you were good friends, and I understand that he also got an honorary law degree from the Catholic University of America.
He got an honorary degree and also the Cardinal Gibbons Award, which is the greatest award that our alumni association gives, yes.
What happens when the Supreme Court has 8 members, when there's a tie? What goes on here?
Well, when the court is divided about evenly between liberals and conservatives, as it currently is, when you have 8 members, what often happens is that decisions are affirmed by an equally divided court, and that's likely to happen in a number of the important cases that have been before the court this term.
There are key cases. I think of the Little Sisters of the Poor, and of course, the Catholic University of America is connected with that.
Also in that case, yes, as well. That's a little bit more complicated because there are a number of cases that are consolidated for argument, and some point one way and some point another way. So in that case, affirming by an equally divided court would leave a conflict in place. So another resolution that the court might opt for is to have set the case down for re-argument in the coming term when there are presumably 9 members of the court.
30 years is a long time to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court.
It sure is.
What do you think Justice Scalia brought to the court in that 30 years?
You know, I think something really important that he brought to the court in that time was a focus on the meaning of the Constitution itself and a way of reading statutes that gives more authority to the people who write constitutions and statutes. One of the difficulties we've been dealing with since Roe against Wade is that constitutional law has been in danger of becoming a political process rather than a legal process, and Justice Scalia's emphasis on original meaning was a good and important counterweight.
There are more justices on the Supreme Court who are Catholic now than I think at any time, but wasn't Scalia bold about his Catholicism?
He certainly made no bones about anything that he believed, and his faith was one of those things. It wasn't something that affected his decisions. In fact, there are some decisions of his, like the one in Employment Division against Smith, that actually dialed back the protection the court gave to religious liberty. So I wouldn't say that his decision-making was driven by his faith, but his public service was certainly an outgrowth of his faith, and I think that the things he believed were consistent with the way he decided most cases. But often the decision that he had to make was to say that the real decision in our system was left to somebody else.
Very interesting. President John Garvey, the Catholic University of America, we appreciate you being with us. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Brian.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Pope Francis draws huge crowds in Mexico. The Pope celebrating Mass today with Mexico's indigenous people in the state of Chiapas. He says they have often been exploited and excluded from society. He thinks the world should learn from their culture and deep appreciation for nature. Today's Mass incorporated 3 native languages. A recent Vatican decree based on Vatican II allows for that in the liturgy. The people in this region are deeply devoted to their faith and to the Pope.
Well, the people in Chiapas love every Pope, and this one has something that no one has before. He has a a magic touch.
Rafael Gamboa, who's from Chiapas, met with our team in Mexico City. Francis celebrated Mass at the Basilica of the Virgin of Guadalupe this weekend. It is considered the largest and most important Marian shrine in the entire world. Thousands packed the square. Many came with specific intentions. EWTN News Nightly's Susie Pinto has one family story.
Mariana Rodriguez is 8 years old. She was born 5 months premature and can't walk. Today, she's asking for a miracle. To walk one day. The Rodriguez family says seeing the Holy Father in their country is the experience of a lifetime. And Pope Francis says he's here to be close to Mexicans like Mariana. The sick, the poor, and people on the fringes. He got his wish to pray before the icon, so loved by Latin Americans. And that devotion to Mary strikes a chord with Mariana's family.
We are Guadalupanos, and we are very happy that the Pope comes here.
When asked what it means to be a Guadalupana, Mariana's parents don't miss a beat.
La fe.
To move faith, it's love, and we love the Virgin.
Mariana's mom says God has always been present, even though it's been rough.
Dios siempre está con nosotros.
And no matter what happens to Mariana, her mom says she's here to give thanks.
Gracias. Dale gracias.
Susie is joining us now from Mexico City. What a beautiful story of the Rodriguez family, Susie. And we saw the Pope in private prayer for a long time before Our Lady of Guadalupe. What does that mean to the Mexican people as he shares their special devotion?
Brian, Our Lady of Guadalupe is a symbol of national unity for Mexicans, and to see Pope Francis pray so devoutly before her image really won their hearts over. Of course, Pope Francis is the first Latin American Pope, and he has great devotion to Our Lady, and specifically Our Lady of Guadalupe. So they were very moved by that gesture, and they really connected with him, seeing him pray before Our Lady.
How would you characterize the Holy Father's message as he crisscrosses Mexico this week?
Brian, it's a message of a call to conversion at all levels of Mexican society, from the bishops to the politicians and to regular folks in the pews and even non-Catholics. The Pope is urging Mexicans to reject corruption, violence, vanity, and pride. He even mentioned those two vices. And he's asking them to open their hearts to God, to seek God. Today in Chiapas, he had a message for the indigenous population. That message was one of inclusion and appreciation. So really, I think this fits in with the Jubilee of Mercy. Pope Francis wants to extend God's mercy to all people.
And how are the people there reacting to the message, and what is next for the Pope's apostolic journey?
Mexicans are really thrilled to have Pope Francis here, and they are excited. They're lining the streets. People are screaming "Viva el Papa!" At every turn. Now the Pope will go on to 2 more stops. It's a jam-packed schedule. Tomorrow he's going to be in Morelia. That's a city in a region that has been plagued by drug-related violence. So the Pope is expected to console the people there. And of course, he wraps up the trip on Wednesday near the U.S.-Mexico border in Juarez. The Pope is going to pray near the border. He's also going to celebrate Mass, and it's really a gesture of solidarity with migrants. The Pope will be specifically praying for migrants who make that journey, who try to cross the U.S.-Mexico border and die. So it's a really strong message, but of course the Pope is speaking as a pastor, and he wants to pray for their souls and express his closeness to them, as this issue really is, it's such a hot issue for both nations.
Susie Pinto with Mark Irons, our Team Mexico for EWTN News Nightly. Thank you, Susie. Coming up, El Paso's bishop looks ahead to the Pope's Mass along the border, and new political developments just days after a raucous Republican debate. On this President's Day, Monday, the 15th of February, we remember Bob Lord, who joined his wife Penny over the weekend in eternal life. They did everything together for 56 years. May God rest their souls. Former President George W. Bush returns to the campaign trail today. He is stumping in South Carolina for brother Jeb. That's a state George W. won when he ran for president. The younger Bush needs a boost. He has been trailing in most of the polls. Donald Trump blasting the Bush brothers during Saturday's Republican debate. Trump says George W. Bush destabilized the Middle East by invading Iraq. He said he lied about weapons of mass destruction when he, quote, knew there were none. Trump also denies Jeb Bush's claim that President Bush kept us safe. Trump says the World Trade Center and the Pentagon were attacked on Bush's watch.
Donald Trump did something I think will not resonate in a Republican primary anywhere in the country. He called George W. Bush a liar.
Former presidential candidate Lindsey Graham says he is offended at Trump's suggestion that President Bush somehow caused 9/11. Graham, of course, has endorsed Jeb Bush. Returning now to our coverage of Pope Francis visiting Mexico this week, many of the crowds greeting him are happy just to catch a glimpse of Francis passing by in the Pope-mobile. Our team in Mexico City asked a local about the experience.
It was like, it's this emotion that you cannot describe, perhaps, no? It's because it's very touchy, very heart-touching.
Heart-touching. The Diocese of El Paso prepares for Wednesday's papal mass near the U.S. border with Mexico. It will be streamed live to thousands at El Paso's Sun Bowl. Catherine Szeltner today talked with El Paso Bishop Mark Seitz about the Pope's message there.
Really, borders shouldn't be points of utter separation, that there's really more that unites us than what separates us. So a mass at the border is a good reminder for us, especially in this world of today that is so polarized, so divided.
You serve on a border city. The topic of immigration is a part of your everyday life. How do you suggest Catholics balance national security with welcoming our neighbor?
Well, the Church says that we certainly need to keep every aspect in account. Borders are a necessary reality in this world. But for us, Catholics, our starting point is always with the recognition of the dignity of the human person and compassion towards that person. In this year of mercy, we're particularly called to reevaluate our approach. I think when you're a disciple of Christ, you begin with a perspective that's a little different than people who are earthbound, and you begin with that recognition.
El Paso, of course, will be celebrating Wednesday's Mass in a very special way at the Sun Bowl. You say this is El Paso's time to shine. Tell us about that.
Well, we're very excited to be gathering people in our big stadium here in El Paso. It seats 50,000 people, and we hope to have it pretty full. This is our opportunity to celebrate the unity that we have across the border. You know, this is really one metropolitan area that has a line drawn across it, and so we feel very close to Juarez. And although many of us will not be able to be in Juarez on that day, all the same, through the marvels of technology, we're going to have a two-way communication. We're going to sing, and we'll have the local dancers from the Indian tribe, who are, by the way, very Catholic. We'll have a local and a national celebration at the Sun Bowl, and the Pope will greet us there.
Well, it's an exciting time in Mexico this week and for Texans. Thank you, Bishop, for speaking with us from El Paso.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
Up next, the new offensive against the Zika virus stirs the debate over contraception and abortion. And a special liturgy for those joining the Catholic Church, how the Pope inspired one woman's faith journey. Pope Francis visiting a children's hospital in Mexico City, accompanied by Mexico's First Lady. The Holy Father greeting more than 36 children who are suffering from cancer. He makes a point of stopping at children's hospitals during these trips. He visits with sick kids and thanks their caregivers. And thank you for joining us this Monday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Doctors Without Borders says one of its hospitals in northern Syria was hit by airstrikes today. Syrian opposition groups blame Russian warplanes. The attacks left at least 7 people dead and 8 missing. Doctors Without Borders says the local population, about 40,000 people, is now without access to medical services, and this is an active war zone. Brazil mobilizes its military and hundreds of thousands of health workers to fight the mosquito that carries the Zika virus. It's called Operation Zika Zero. Experts say the virus is sweeping through parts of Latin America. Zika is mostly harmless for adults, but it's linked to serious birth defects among newborns. Not proven, but linked. Alarm in recent months has created a push for contraceptives and more abortions in this mostly Catholic nation. Gloria Purvis chairs Black Catholics United for Life. She's my co-host for Morning Glory on EWTN Radio. Would you say Brazil is generally a pro-life nation, Gloria?
Well, it's the most populous Catholic country, and in their laws, they do have some leeway for abortion in cases of rape and incest and for the physical and mental health of the mother. But with the Zika virus, like you said, Brian, it is not proven that it is a definitive link to these birth defects. So one must wonder, is this just hype and hysteria from these pro-abortion lobby to try to undo what little legal protection there is for the unborn and to push their artificial contraceptive mentality on the masses in Brazil and other Catholic countries?
It is scary for moms, though, who, when they think about having a child with a birth defect. What would you say to a mother who has the Zika virus and is pregnant?
Well, I could totally relate to the anxiety because I was an older mom when I conceived, and there was a lot of pressure from the medical establishment to abort. But I would say to these mothers that have Zika, remember, it's not a definitive link. Take your prenatal medicine, your vitamins, take care of yourself, and do those mosquito abatement procedures that they say: empty out standing water, wear long pants, wear long sleeves, so that you don't transmit the virus to anyone else.
And children with disabilities are still a gift from God. They are life. So these people who are fighting back, some with children with disabilities, what powerful witness they're giving us.
I think it's a huge, powerful witness. Number one, it unmasks the lie that if you have a child with special needs, that your life is over. It unmasks the lie that abortion is somehow a cure for these children. It isn't. It's a death sentence. Abortion is a death sentence for these children and a permanent wound for these mothers and fathers. So for these parents to stand up and say, no, we love our children. Our lives have been enriched by these children with special needs, is a counter witness to the lie of the pro-abortion lobby.
And I'm sure we'll talk more about it tomorrow morning on Morning Glory.
You bet.
See you then, Gloria. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, an important step for hundreds of thousands of soon-to-be Catholics as dioceses celebrate what's called the rite of election this week. As Wyatt Goolsby reports, it's an opportunity for bishops to offer encouragement and prayers.
On Sunday, thousands packed the National Basilica to celebrate those converting to Catholicism. They came from churches and communities across the Archdiocese of Washington for what's called the rite of election. It's not a mass, but a special liturgy, a checkpoint for those who will be welcomed into the church right before Easter Sunday.
St. John Newman Parish of Gaithersburg presents its candidates for recognition.
After the readings and homily, Cardinal Donald Worrell invited some 1,300 adults, teens, and children to the altar for a blessing. Some have never been baptized. Others are converting from different Christian denominations. In the presence of their sponsors, the participants expressed their desire to become Catholic, kicking off a final period of spiritual preparation. One of those soon-to-be Catholics is Christy Jones. She was raised Baptist, but had been thinking about becoming Catholic for years. It was Pope Francis' September visit to the United States which inspired her to take the next step.
It was his visit and the compassion and the love that he showed to people that really moved my heart. I'll never forget, he was on the tarmac in Philadelphia, and he stopped his motorcade to get out of the car and bless a young man who was living with disabilities and his family. And for me, it was the moment, and I just knew that I wanted to be part of this faith that he was the head of.
Joan says it was right after the Holy Father's visit that she began an RCIA program to learn more about the faith. Her advice for anyone still on the fence?
Do it. Just do it. It's beautiful. I have never experienced faith. I've never experienced a relationship with Christ as I have through the Catholic Church.
A sentiment that resonates here at the National Shrine and across the world. Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, that's certainly inspiring to all of us. Thank you, Wyatt. Until tomorrow, for our EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. As we leave you tonight, we revisit the Papal Mass this weekend at the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe.